The phone rang just as the kettle clicked off. I hadn't taken my second sip of coffee when I heard the voice of Gerald, the security guard, through the receiver. "Mrs. Dorsey, your daughter-in-law is here. She says she's the new owner." I stared at the steam curling from my cup. "Let her in," I said evenly. I didn't rush. I placed my mug on the coaster stood and walked to the study. The morning sun was still low, casting long shadows across the rug. I bent down, tapped out the code on the panel behind the bookshelf, and pulled open the small safe. A stack of documents sat waiting inside, exactly where I left them. Footsteps echoed in the hallway just as I closed the safe and slid the panel shut. Selma Bree's voice rang out before I could turn. She stepped in like she owned the walls. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she held up a folder crisp and color-coded. "You can start packing. I'll be hiring movers for the bigger pieces." She smiled like she was doing me a favor. I watched her for a moment. No makeup, still in her yoga jacket, hair pulled into a sleek bun. No shame. Just confidence, like everything here had always been meant for her. "I'm moving in," she continued. "Wade and I decided this place is better suited for a young family." I walked past her without a word, opened the balcony door, and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face. I let it. From the corner of my eye, I saw her placing her folder on the table, flipping through forms pointing at signatures. My phone buzzed in my palm. Louisa had already responded to my earlier message. "We need to talk today. It's urgent." I typed, "She's here." Then I turned and looked back at Bree standing in my living room, evaluating furniture like she was preparing a listing. I closed the balcony door slowly behind me, locking it with a click she didn't hear. It started innocently enough, if there is such a thing. 3 months ago, Wade came over with Bree and 2 cups of overpriced coffee. "Mom," he said, "Bree's been learning a lot about estate planning. We were thinking it might be good to help you organize things just in case." He said just in case, like I hadn't been keeping my affairs in perfect order for over 20 years. But I nodded. I told them they could look over the files as long as I was there. Bree smiled, politely, took photos with her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, and asked one too many questions about property titles. I didn't think much of it then, but last week I got a letter from the Property Association asking to confirm an ownership update. My full name had been searched on a county clerk's website twice. The mortgage company left a voicemail someone had tried to access my account. Now Bree was standing in my living room, laying out the next step, like it was already done. "You'll love the space Wade plans to turn the guest room into an office," she said. "We just figured it makes sense to streamline everything before there's a medical issue." She was clever, disguising conquest as concern. I sat in my usual chair, the one by the window. Bree paced the floor with too much familiarity, like she'd been imagining this moment. Her words were clean, rehearsed, removing risk, freeing up dead space, aligning priorities. She didn't notice I wasn't responding. I watched the wind sway the blinds. I remembered the time she asked to borrow money just until Wade's bonus cleared. That money was never returned. I had told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now she wasn't asking. She was taking. I reached for the notebook beside me and started writing down the names she dropped. People, departments, law firms. She wasn't being careful anymore. She thought I had already surrendered. She didn't see me slide my phone under the cushion and hit record. When Bree finally left, she didn't say goodbye, just gathered her papers with a smug little smirk and said, "We'll be in touch." I waited until the elevator doors closed before walking back to the desk. She'd left a folder behind, probably assuming I wouldn't look too closely. But I did. Buried under generic property forms and transition plans was a scanned copy of a document I hadn't seen in years. A power of attorney signed by me, dated 4 years ago. I remembered that week clearly, a scheduled knee surgery, Wade insisting I appoint someone just in case. I signed it thinking it was temporary for hospital access only. But this wasn't a hospital, and Bree wasn't using it to help. Attached were emails, drafts to the condo association, queries to the bank, a letter addressed to my mortgage company requesting a title update signed electronically in my name, all filed in the last 10 days. My fingers were steady when I picked up the phone. Louisa answered on the second ring. "Selma," she said immediately. "I was expecting this call." She didn't need me to explain. "There's been movement on the condo. A background process was triggered, quiet title filing, likely based on that POA. Nothing's been transferred yet, but it's getting close." I thanked her and hung up. Then I walked into my bedroom straight to the built-in closet. I lifted the shoe rack and felt for the latch. The hidden drawer clicked open with a soft scrape. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was the folder Banyan Holdings. Wade didn't know about it. Neither did Bree. It wasn't a secret, I just never saw the need to explain. After my husband died, I put the apartment in the trust, tied to a holding company under my maiden name, for protection, for peace. Now it was the only thing between me and the door Bree planned to push me out of. I slid the folder into my tote and stood up already, dialing Louisa again as I reached for my coat. Louisa cleared a space on her desk and slid the folder closer to her. Her fingers flipped through the pages quickly, quiet, practiced. She didn't need to read them all. She remembered the setup well. "You've kept everything clean," she said. "No transfers, no joint titles, no holes. That trust is airtight." I nodded once. It was the reason I had gone through the trouble of creating Banyan Holdings in the first place. After my husband passed, the paperwork felt endless. Everyone wanted signatures, confirmations, notarizations. I remember thinking, I don't want to go through this again, not with anyone else involved. So I used the name I was born with, Dorsey, and moved certain assets into the trust. The apartment, a brokerage account, a piece of land outside the city. Not to hide anything, just to make sure I could move in peace. Bree and Wade had always assumed everything I had came through my marriage, and that when I went, they'd collect what was naturally theirs. But they never asked how I bought this place after Stephen died. Never wondered why the deed didn't carry his name. Louisa tapped the edge of one document. "They've filed a quiet title claim using that POA, but they'll hit a wall. This property isn't under your married name. It's never been part of your joint estate." I stared at the legal description of the apartment, the long parcel number, the seal from the state. "They're about to realize their whole heist is built on air," Louisa said, almost amused, but I didn't laugh. "They don't just want the apartment," I said. "They want the history behind it. They want to rewrite how it got here, make it look like it was handed down to them, like I was just holding it warm for their future." Louisa looked at me, her expression steady. I sat back, hands folded in my lap. My voice stayed calm. "They don't know it yet, but they've stepped into something they can't undo." She reached for her calendar. "Let's make it official then." I nodded. "Let's." I called Wade just after noon. He didn't answer. I waited 10 minutes and sent a short message. "We need to talk today." An hour later, he called back. No greeting, no softness, just Mom Bree was just trying to help. "You overreacted. It's not like we were stealing." I didn't say anything for a moment. I let the silence press against him. "Then why file a quiet title?" I asked. "Why forge my name with a document that was never meant for this?" There was a long pause. I could hear him shifting, maybe walking around the house. "Bree thought the place would eventually be ours anyway," he muttered. "I mean, you're not getting any younger, Mom. We're just trying to make things easier down the line. Plan ahead." He sounded almost proud of that, like he'd reframed it all into some noble act of planning. "Did you even read the deed?" I asked quietly. "What?" "The deed. The actual title. Did you read it?" He didn't answer. I could picture him standing in that kitchen, I helped renovate after their first year of marriage, trying to recall paperwork he never bothered to open. You didn't, did you? I said. Bree handled that part, he replied. I closed my eyes. My son, who used to call me before job interviews just to hear me say, "You've got this." The same boy who used to cry when I worked late because he hated eating dinner without me, was now standing on the other end of the line speaking to me like a client he was trying to push out of a deal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain anything further. You've made your position clear, I said. Wait, Mom. Don't be like I ended the call. I set the phone down on the table, took a long breath, and turned back to the window. The city moved quietly beneath me. Somewhere in the silence, I found my answer. I stood and began making a list. Bree would be back, and this time she wouldn't be alone. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't tired. At sunrise, I made coffee and moved through the apartment like someone finishing the last moves of a puzzle. I installed the discreet door camera I'd kept in a drawer for over a year, just in case. Then I called building management, calmly asked for the general counsel's extension, and forwarded a digital copy of the deed tied to Banyan Holdings. No drama. No warning. Just facts. At 8:57 a.m., the camera pinged. Bree stood at the front entrance with a man I'd never seen before, mid-40s, slick suit phone already in his hand. She was wearing white, like it meant something. The front desk called up. Mrs. Dorsey, your daughter-in-law is here. She says she's brought legal counsel to finalize the occupancy review. I didn't blink. Let them up. I opened the door before they had a chance to knock. Selma Bree said brightly, "This is Marcus. He's helping us with the transition." She said it like it was a wedding plan. Marcus stepped forward, hand extended, already reaching into his briefcase with the other. We're requesting formal acknowledgement of co-ownership under the assumption of transferred authority via durable POA. I looked at him. May I see your ID? He paused, confused. Bree stiffened. I stepped aside. The building requires legal identification for all visitors involved in ownership matters. He handed over his card, legit, but irrelevant. I held the card a moment, then pressed the intercom. This is Selma Dorsey, in Unit 14C. Please refer to the ownership ledger under Banyan Holdings. There's an unauthorized legal party attempting access. There was a long pause. Understood, the desk responded. Security is on the way. 10 minutes later, Marcus was escorted out. Bree followed behind, hissing protests. You'll regret this, Selma, she snapped. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I met her eyes. Next time, read the right name on the deed. Back upstairs, I poured the rest of my coffee, still warm. I sat by the window as the building settled back into quiet. And I began writing down exactly what needed to happen next. By noon the next day, Louisa had filed the fraud complaint with the county clerk's office. She didn't waste time. The forged title attempt submitted under outdated authority flagged multiple automatic alerts. The bank froze all activity tied to the transaction. She called me after filing. That power of attorney expired the moment you stood up from that hospital bed, she said. Using it for property transfer is not just invalid, it's criminal. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the building's legal counsel, forwarded all supporting documents, and copied the security director. By mid-afternoon, Bree's name was added to the internal ban list. She would not be allowed back onto the premises without legal intervention. Wade texted me that evening. Once, then twice, then a third time around midnight. First message. Why didn't you say the condo wasn't in your name? Second message. This is getting out of hand. Bree's upset. Third message. We could have worked this out, Mom. I read them all, then placed the phone face down on the table. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and wrote to my financial advisor, please transfer all accounts currently in my name into the existing trust under Banyan Holdings. Use the same structure as the condo. I want everything consolidated by next week. Then one more email short to the point to the building's legal team, advance the civil claim. No press, no noise, just process. I closed the computer and leaned back in my chair. They had gambled everything on a lie. Assumed my age meant weakness. Assumed my silence meant surrender. What they didn't account for was that I've always done my best work in silence. That I don't speak unless I've already decided what to do. The next morning, I received a notification from the HOA portal. Bree had formally contested her ban. I sent the reply Louisa had written for me. Then, I poured a fresh cup of coffee and opened the side drawer where I kept the old family photos, deciding what stayed and what I no longer needed. The message came just before noon. Wade, again. This time it wasn't an accusation or a demand. Just a line of text. Dinner tonight, Bree wants to clear the air. I stared at it for a while. I didn't feel anger. Just a kind of dull, practiced recognition. Like rereading a book and already knowing how the chapter ends. I replied simply, no thank you. That evening, I knocked on Lillian's door instead. She opened it with a bright smile and ushered me in before I could even speak. Her apartment always smelled faintly of eucalyptus and paper. She had pulled out her old record player and let it hum in the background as we sat down to eat. Nothing fancy, just a shared plate of roast chicken and green beans followed by a slice of pear tart she'd picked up from the market. We didn't talk about children, or lawsuits, or property. We talked about paint colors. The jazz club she used to sneak into in '63. The time she drove across Nevada in a borrowed car just to see a gallery exhibit before it closed. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You know, people think we're done, that once your hair turns silver, you've got nothing left anyone would want to take." I nodded, slowly. Until they realize we've built more than they've ever had to fight for. We toasted to that, just 2 glasses of water, no ceremony needed. When I got home, I walked past the dining room. The table was set for no one. No flowers, no plates, just light from the window catching the grain in the wood. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt kind. Not heavy, just mine. I didn't set the alarm that night. I didn't check the door 3 times. I didn't glance toward the camera feed. I brushed my teeth, folded down the bed, and let the night carry me without resistance. The condo felt steady beneath me, grounded, like it had always been mine. I slept through until morning, and when I woke, something in me had already shifted. By the end of the week, Bree received the cease and desist order delivered by certified mail and signed 4 at the front desk of her building. The court hearing date followed 2 days later. Louisa handled the appearance. I didn't need to be there. She said Bree arrived flustered without her lawyer and tried to delay the proceedings. The judge declined. It didn't take long for the story to ripple outward. People talk. Especially when they've been at your baby shower, your anniversary dinner, your holiday brunch. Bree's side of the family began pulling back no more likes on social media, no more group invitations. They didn't want to be caught in the splash. Wade stopped texting. I wasn't surprised. His silence didn't sting anymore. It was just an absence I had grown used to. I spent my weekend going over documents with Louisa. Titles, accounts, trusts. We moved through the list methodically. "Are you ready to update the estate?" she asked. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. We adjusted everything to reflect Banyan Holdings as sole beneficiary of my assets. Clean lines, no ambiguity. Then I dictated a final clause. Louisa's pen paused. "No direct inheritance unless named through active agreement," I said. "Everything must be reviewed and signed in advance. No assumptions. No automatic rights." She looked up. "So you're cutting them off?" I folded my hands. "I'm giving them the freedom they wanted to live without, depending on what isn't theirs." She nodded and made the note. That night, I sat in the quiet again, not as a woman preparing for loss, but as someone reclaiming what had always been hers. The apartment felt warmer somehow, not because anything had changed in the air or the walls, but because I no longer felt the need to defend it. There was nothing left to explain, no bridge to rebuild. I took the signed copy of the revised estate plan and placed it in the folder marked Final. Then I slid it into the locked drawer, closed the desk, and turned out the light. It took 4 weeks for the fraud claim to be formally dismissed. The ruling was swift and firm. The power of attorney was invalid for property transfer, and the attempt to claim ownership through it was flagged as intentional misrepresentation. In simpler words, attempted theft. No criminal charges followed. I hadn't asked for them. That was never the point. The building's board sent a written apology, not for what happened, but for not catching it sooner. Bree's building access was permanently revoked. Her name, now erased from all internal communications, was never on anything real to begin with. On a Tuesday morning, I took my usual walk through downtown. The air was sharp and clean. I passed the florist on 9th Street, the one where I used to buy fresh blooms for Wade's birthdays. I slowed in front of the window, saw the same dusty ribbon patterns, the same kind owner who always gave me one extra stem. I stood there for a moment, then kept walking. Back at the condo, I opened the small box I had ordered weeks ago. Inside was a brushed metal nameplate, simple and exact. I took a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and replaced the old one myself. Selma Dorsey. Architect Emerita. No Mrs. No shared name. No roles that tied me to someone else's story. Just the one I'd earned. I poured a cup of tea and pulled out my old design sketchbook. The leather cover had softened over time, corners worn from use. I hadn't opened it in nearly 8 years. Inside were pages of unfinished plans, a lakeside cabin, a reading nook built into a stairwell, a sunroom with adjustable light panels. None of them built. Not yet. I picked up a pencil, drew one slow line, then another. The movements came back without hesitation. I wasn't drawing for clients or for approval, just for the quiet satisfaction of vision made visible. There was nothing I needed to say to Wade or Bree. They had made their choices, and I had reclaimed mine.